What I do have faith in, however, is people all around the world who will take a stance against this. So let August be your month of action, protest, take to the streets.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. This is some video of the Palestinian child Muhammad al-Alami. We mentioned his killing on our last week's program. Al-Alawi's whole family was in the car trying to leave their village to go for some errands. His father saw that a mobile checkpoint of Israeli soldiers had been set up, so he backed up for a while and then turned the car around. The red circle in this video shows the car driving away and how far it was from the soldiers. Soldiers chased the car and started firing. They fired 13 bullets at the car. Those shots were the last sounds that Muhammad ever heard. He was shot holding bread that his family had purchased. The IDF spokesman said that soldiers had suspected a Palestinian of improperly burying a baby. So they chased after the al-Alami car and opened fire. It gets worse. At the funeral of al-Alami, the IDF decided it had to show up. Hundreds of mourners advanced to the cemetery, and the IDF opened fire. And they killed a young 20-year-old man named Shuawat Akkad. Reports of the child's murder were made by the Defense of Children International Palestine, DCIP. The day after the report, Israeli soldiers raided the office of the DCIP and stole computers, a hard drive, and personal information in portfolios about children. There was 12 minutes of CCD footage, and then the soldiers yanked the cord. Israeli journalist Amira Haas wrote in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, "The burglars did not leave a document indicating who issued the arrest order. They did not issue a receipt for the stolen property. They did not arrest or summon for questioning in advance any of the directors or lawyers of DCIP who are well known to the military for representing Palestinian juveniles who are arrested and tried as part of the routine of protecting the settlements." Haas's headline was, "When Israeli soldiers are thieves in the night." Now from the DCIP video about a young man Israeli government forces killed in May.
ابن سعيد الله يرضى عليه الحمد لله الله يرحمه الله يرضى عليه يعني قتلوه يعني طب شو ذنبه هذا الولد يعني 16 سنة يا حبيبي صح ولا لا شو ذنبه مش ذنبه يعني حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل فيهم.
كان محبوب عند أصدقائه وعند معلميه عند كل وين ما كان يروح إنه سمعته طيب الحمد لله.
يقول لي ماما أنت مش إن كل ما أنت صاحبتي صديق يعني كل إشي يعني في حقيقة والله.
هان استشهد ابن خالتي سعيد وانا كنت جنبه يعني كانوا واقفين ما شاء الله عنا يعني ولا هو الجيش اجانا من تحت الزيتون من هان ما سمعنا صوت رصاص ولا هو طالع. هسا اول ما اشي انصاب سعيد يعني انا جيت احمله حملته شوي ولا هو صابني في ظهري يعني الجيش ظلهم وراي لاحكيني وقف وكل لي وقف 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 وانا شارد.
يعني رحت تقريبا الساعة 9:15 9:03 في الليل، رحت إني أجيبه المنطقة اللي هم قالوا إنه في الجيش هناك. رحت اللي هو بكل الجندي بطخ يب ارجع فيش يعني أنت إلك ابن هان، ما في إلك ابن، ارجع. بقول له ابني أنا ابني هان عندكم ما فيش.
حتى حكت لي أمه إنه واصل كانت سيارة إسعاف موجودة هناك ومنعوهم يقربوا على المكان.
عاقوا دخولنا 5 دقائق تقريبا لأنه كان الإصابة بعيدة بحدود 100 متر عن الحاجز الأول. دخلونا بعد 5 دقائق، وصلنا الحاجز الثاني. بعد الحاجز الثاني دخلونا بعد 10 دقائق لمكان الإصابة. وصلت أنا وصلنا مباشرة بعد ما دخلونا الجيش عليه. ألقينا شخص ممدد على الأرض محطوط عليه بطانية أو حرام. نزلت أنا قعدت جنب كتافه فرفعت الحرام، تفاجأت إنه هو موجود ابن أختي.
لما وصلت المستشفى طبعا زوجتي انهارت في البكاء وأنا انهارت في البكاء. كان وقت هذيك اللحظة صعبة جدا.
كانت علاقتي فيه أكثر من كلاعب كرة قدم أو كأكثر صديق. لعبنا في أكثر من نادي بحدود 4-5 نوادي. أجتنا دعوة من دولة مصر في بطولة دولية راح نشارك فيها، وكان اسم الشهيد سعيد عودة مشارك وطالع معانا. بعد ما صار الحدث واستشهد صاحبي وزميلي سعيد عودة، بشكر دولة مصر على تسمية البطولة باسم الشهيد سعيد عودة. الصور هاي آخر تمرين إلنا وتبدلنا بلايز بعض. أنا لبست بلوزته وهو لبس بلوزتي وكتبت عليها من ورا حياتي أصبحت مظلمة من دونك. بعد تقريبا 10 أيام من استشهاده أخذت قرار أنا بيني وبين نفسي إني بديش أكمل فوتبول، خلاص بدي أوقف. رنت علي أمه قالت لي بزعل منك، أنا بدي أكمل مسيرة حلم ابني وترفع اسمه في أكبر نوادي في أوروبا.
Now, to change the mood for a moment, some photos of 2 guys eating Ben and Jerry's ice cream to celebrate the corporation's willingness to stand up to the apartheid state. Send me your pictures with Ben and Jerry's ice cream and I'll put it on our show. Attach the picture to mail@thestruggle.org. The violence in May was started as a result of the efforts of settlers and the Israeli government to cleanse the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood of Jerusalem of Palestinians.
My name is Mohammed Al-Kurd and I'm from Sheikh Jarrah in occupied Jerusalem. On Monday, August 2nd, the so-called Israeli Supreme Court will rule to decide on whether it'll accept or reject the appeal submitted by my family and 3 others against the dispossession orders that will be enacted against us by US registered settler organizations that are supported by billionaires. We, of course, have no faith in the Israeli judicial system because it is inherently colonial and expansionist and sustains settlements. What I do have faith in, however, is people all around the world who will take a stance against this. So let August be your month of action, protest, Take to the streets, call your representatives and politicians. Let them know that Israeli impunity, war crimes, and ethnic cleansing shall not be committed in your name or with your tax dollars.
Democracy Now! Interviewed Mohammed Al-Kurd after the ruling by the Israeli Supreme Court.
We go now to occupied East Jerusalem in the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, where Palestinian families are trying to block Jewish settlers from forcibly expelling them from their own homes. On Monday, the Israeli Supreme Court offered a deal to 4 of the Palestinian families facing eviction. They could stay in their homes for now if they begin paying rent to a Jewish settlement organization which claims ownership over the disputed properties. The Palestinian families rejected the deal, insisting they were the legal owners. The Israeli Supreme Court has not yet set a date for its final ruling. The United Nations has described the planned evictions as a possible war crime. UN Rights Office spokesperson Rupert Colville said in May, quote, "The occupying power cannot confiscate private property in occupied territories." Well, we're joined now by Mohammed Al-Kurd, a Palestinian writer and poet who's organizing to save his family's home in Sheikh Jarrah. He was in the courtroom on Monday. Welcome back to Democracy Now!, Mohammed. Could you describe what happened Monday in the court, what the proceedings were like, and what the response to the deal has been?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. The court hearing at the Israeli Colonial Supreme Court was like any other hearing we've had, except for the massive amount of press outside the court hall. Essentially what happened is that we were in a courtroom that was speaking only in Hebrew, and we do not speak Hebrew. Most of us that live in Sheikh Jarrah do not speak Hebrew, so we were there playing a game of broken telephone, trying to decipher what is being said. But we understood that the Supreme Court is evading its responsibilities. The court is really aware of the international media pressure. They even explicitly made a remark about the media pressure. And so they wanted to reach a quote-unquote diplomatic solution. And so they're evading their responsibilities, pressuring us to reach a settlement with the settlers instead. Now, the way this is being reported or the way this is being conveyed might sound like a good deal, but what's happening here is that we would be living at the mercy of settlers, paying rent to live in our own homes, and dealing with all kinds of arbitrary policies. I imagine I personally don't love the idea of having a landlord, let alone having a settler landlord.
And Mohammed, could you go a little bit for our listeners and viewers who don't know the story of the history of your home going back to 1956? And you wrote in an article in The Nation last summer that your grandmother, who was an icon of Palestinian resistance, was one of the original people who settled in that particular home.
Yeah, absolutely. My grandmother was among 27 other families that were forcibly expelled from their homes in the 1948 Nakba upon the establishment of what is called the State of Israel on Palestinian lands through ethnic cleansing. And so they were made refugees, and they went from city to city, and they found themselves in Jerusalem. The United Nations, alongside the Jordanian government, decided to build Sheikh Jarrah, the units of Sheikh Jarrah, as a refugee project to house them. Unfortunately, both of these entities never fulfilled their promises of transferring the land ownership to the Palestinian refugees because of the Nakba in 1967, because of the war with the Israeli forces. And so in the 70s, you began seeing Israeli settler organizations largely registered in the United States and funded by private donors in the United States claiming our property. Now, to understand this, you have to understand the larger picture that almost every neighborhood in occupied Jerusalem is facing the same threat of NGOs, settler NGOs that are fabricating documents and using an inherently biased judicial system, an inherently colonial judicial system to expel Palestinians. So you have
the whole drama about who legally owns this piece of property is grotesque. 800,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homes and land in 1947 and 1948, and none can get any of their property back. In the early 1950s, the Israeli Supreme Court ruled that Palestinians of Birim and Irkut could return to their land. But the Israeli government to this day has defied its own Supreme Court and won't let them return. So this whole thing as a legal matter is a farce. Coming on Saturday, August 14th at 1 o'clock, a Zoom panel from Syria to Palestine, the People's Resistance, with Joseph Daher, Mariam Barghouti, and Nidal Batari. Should be excellent. 1 o'clock, Saturday the 14th. Now we go to an interview on what should be a world issue: the fate of a couple hundred acres of land in Connecticut's biggest city. It should be a world issue because it deals with a plan that would destroy mature trees, the absolute best form of carbon capture. I'll be speaking with Leila Florell. She is a longtime Bridgeport, Connecticut resident and a founder of Preserve Remington Woods. And things seem to be coming to a head on that issue. Good afternoon, Leila.
Good afternoon, Stan. So nice to be here.
Now, we've covered this issue a number of times on the struggle, but now there's a deadline of sorts. I believe it's August 9th. What's going on?
Well, the zoning in Bridgeport, the planning and zoning, they have been redoing the planning and zoning for a while now, and they have come up with a proposed plan. And what they've done is they've changed the zoning for the entirety of Remington Woods to be a zoning that accepts commercial buildings, a zoning for commercial buildings. It's a position of Preserve Remington Woods, as well as most of the people in Bridgeport that we speak to, that want to preserve the woods as a nature wildlife preserve with walking paths so people can have access to it. So it would be good for wildlife. It would be good for all the services that the woods provides. It would be good for the people of Bridgeport and in many other ways, which I can get into.
What happens with August 9th?
August 9th is the deadline for commenting on the zoning. So they've changed the zoning to the entirety of Remington Woods to be commercial. And we want to have people go in and comment on that and say, we don't want that zoning. We want the zoning to be changed so that the entirety of Remington Woods is a wildlife nature preserve with walking paths, no development or any other uses.
Okay, so we'll get into how people might do that a little later on. But let's go back a step. Let's say people don't know anything about Remington Woods. Where is it? How did it become a woods? How big is it? Some basic facts.
Okay, Remington Woods, how did it become a woods? That's interesting. Of course, the woods was there before humans were on the planet. And when indigenous peoples were around the woods, they respected it. The colonists were in awe of its beauty. They wrote poems about it. The industrialists polluted it. And there has been a 20-year cleanup of the pollution mandated by the EPA. DuPont owned it, and a DuPont spinoff called Corteva owns it now, and they want to destroy it for development. It's 422 acres. Most of it is in Bridgeport, part of it is in Stratford. It's a beautiful, vibrant, living forest community of plants and animals that's able to perpetuate itself indefinitely with just air, water, and sunlight. And in addition to perpetuating itself and making a home and habitat for all the animals and biodiversity, it constantly puts out services for the people to enjoy, and they're crucial services like oxygen. It cleans some of the dirtiest air in the country. We have some of the highest rates of asthma and some of the highest death rates from COVID because of the air quality. It cleans the air. It would be even worse if the woods were destroyed. It cools the air. We're in record-breaking temperatures. The West is on fire. We're sitting here breathing the smoke from the Western wildfires. Environmental catastrophe around the world is raging, and Bridgeport is part of the world, and people are part of nature. So
don't mature trees also keep carbon in the ground? And if they're knocked down for any kind of development, all that carbon gets sent into the atmosphere.
Absolutely, and that would make global warming even worse. And another thing that a forest community of that size does is it stabilizes the local climate. So there are a whole, it mitigates flooding, it mitigates storms, it increases biodiversity, it stops soil erosion, it makes the soil better. There are a whole long list of physical services that the forest community puts out that people benefit from just on a physical basis.
Now, what about the argument that, well, this is private land, and if the city of Bridgeport zones it in a way that it can't be used, this DuPont spinoff company is going to sue the city?
That may be, yes. There is that threat. The city has stood up against many lawsuits in the past. Whenever somebody in the city does something wrong, we spend millions and millions of dollars in legal fees to defend them. I think we can spend some money defending this. We are sitting here literally breathing the air from California wildfires. California is in fire. Mexico is in drought. That's where our food comes from. Mm-hmm. We are not exempt from this. The thing that we have to understand is we all live in a culture that is biased, that is prejudiced against nature. And this bias is leading to global environmental catastrophe.
And these words, catastrophe, or you could say the word emergency, when things like that happen, laws and property get changed and bypassed all the time because it's an emergency. And certainly the world is facing climate collapse, as some people call it, and things could be done.
Absolutely. Well, look at what was done with the pandemic. The whole country changed because it needed to, it had to. We did the same thing when the Second World War came. In 6 months, the entire country changed because it had to. There was an emergency. Absolutely. And this is an emergency. This is leading toward ecocide, which is the death of all life on the planet, the only planet that we know of in the universe that has life. And
now, if people want to comment, You don't have to live in Bridgeport. Is that right?
No,
To make a
that's
comment?
right.
And it is an international issue. Anyone in the world could comment. So how would they do that? We
Well,
could superimpose websites, pictures of them and addresses. So how would you do that to
Yeah.
comment?
well, you go, there are, let me see, there are, the zoning must be changed. There are two ways to comment. I have a petition, so that would be Preserve Remington Woods petition, and the zoning has to be changed. So you would go, there are a couple of ways you could do that. You could email Lynn Haig at bridgeportconnecticut.gov.
And who is Lynn Hage?
Lynn works in the Planning and Zoning Department.
Mm-hmm.
So that would probably be one of the best ways of doing it. You could also go to
Zonebridgeport.com, is it?
zonebridgeport.com, review proposed zoning.
And then make a comment through that website.
Yes. Now, if you go to preserveremingtonwoods.com
Mm-hmm.
and go to the action page, I will have all that information written on the action page. So you don't have to, remember it here.
All right. Well, thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you very much, Dan, and thank you for your concern. Bye.
Wherever you live in the world, I hope you will send a message to the Bridgeport city government. We have one atmosphere and we're in a climate emergency. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.